I have had some fairly unpleasant experiences with the heat. So I did
Yeah.
back in 2019. I did Ironman Frankfurt, and it was 42, and there was
Hmm.
no breeze. There was no breeze, and
Yeah.
it was so hot in Frankfurt, in fact, that in different places where you stood on the tarmac was actually melting on the roads. It was
Wow.
crazy.
Jeez.
And I think something like 5,000 people started the race, and less than half finished. It was a war zone. There was just people pulling out right, left, and center, and that's because of the heat. We're not used to training in that kind of heat. So when you come to racing, it's yeah, it can be really, really tough. So I'm hoping Go
Yeah.
is not going to be anything like that. So
No, Goa won't be like that. Goa's humidity is better. So like to give you a sense of it, when the East Coast, when we went up, we hiked up this peak called Saddle Peak. Saddle Peak is the highest peak in the Andaman Sea. So basically, we have the Andaman Sea, which is the coastline of the Andaman Islands and Thailand and Myanmar. You've got a little chain over there. This is a 2,700 feet hike up a hill
okay,
from sea
okay.
level. So you're literally going from sea level to 2,700 feet in about 2.5 hours.
Oh wow,
And
okay.
we went in there thinking, hey, this is going to be fine. It's not going to be too bad. We took 3 t-shirts and about 2.5 liters of water. We were through that about halfway up. We were done with it. The 2 t-shirts were done. And we were done with it. We were done with about 1.5 liters of water. And we were like, what is happening here? But then it was oddly horrible conditions to hike in. Like we picked the peak of summer, the end of April, and we went up a mountain with no wind, no breeze, no clouds, nothing. Just pure, pure humidity. It's just humidity, like 100% humidity.
Yeah.
So
When I did Frankfurt, it wasn't the humidity, it was the heat more than anything. But I remember a few years ago, I took my kids on. Oh, it's quite a few years ago now. I took my kids on holiday to Turkey in August, and it was super hot and super humid as well. And whenever I go on holiday, I have to train. Yeah, I have to do something. I'm all you know how it is. I'm always active, even if I've got the kids. I'm like, is it okay if Dad nips to the gym? Is it okay if I just go and do like a 10K run or whatever it might be? So I'd been doing quite a bit of my training in the gym because I didn't want to leave the girls, and it was super convenient. But then one day I said to them, look, before you girls get up, I'm going to go for a run, and I'm going to go and do 8K or 10K, maybe something like this. So I leave, and it's before 8 a.m. in the morning. I think I managed 2K, 3K maybe at max. I was dead, and I don't think it was just the kind of psychological aspect of running in the heat. I think physiologically, my body just couldn't seem to get the oxygen into my lungs and around my body. It was, man, I nearly died, and I did 3K, and I was like, nah, this is not for me. And I went back to the air conditioned gym.
No, that makes. I mean, it can be really, really rough, especially once. I think our window of comfort is about 6:30 a.m. Like till about 6:30 a.m. in the morning, it feels like a different city. And right after 6:30 a.m. when the sun picks up, it's just a different city. It just feels like two different environments to train in almost.
Yeah. So do you find that you guys do a lot of your training in the morning? I know, having spoken to people out in Dubai and places like that, a lot of those guys who are training for like Ironman or long distance endurance events, they'll get up at 3 a.m. and do their training. And I'm like, how do you do that? And then do a full day of work. It's like, it's crazy.
So my coaching day is like what? So I'm a in the trenches coach, in the sense that I work with we have about 240 to 50 clients between our online and in-person clients, and we have batches in the morning. So I work with clients, say, from 6 in the morning till we have hourly batches. So I'm what you call a classic strength and conditioning coach. So we work with clients to get them stronger. We use different modalities, basically between eccentric, concentrics, plyometrics. We use a bunch of training modalities. So I start coaching people at about 5:30 in the morning. So I train at like 4:15, 4:30 in the morning. Because you don't get time otherwise. Otherwise, it's going to be later in the evening. And I can go shoot the air bike. I can go on. I can do a 12 or 15 minute HIIT or a more classic, say a longer steady state thing on the cycle later in the day. But in the morning, I like to get my strength out of the way. It's just definitely a better way to do it in Madras. Because around 4:35 in the evening, when coaching picks up again in the evening, it's hard to squeeze in time. So 3:30 just feels like death over here. It just, you can't go and echo out. Pull-ups are just, you just feel heavier on the pull-ups. The push-ups don't move as quickly. Everything feels a little like slow motion almost. You know what I mean? It just, everything just moves, like you said, like when you were running in Turkey, it just felt like you were not able to find that gear. It's like a gear gets stuck. That's essentially how it feels sometimes.
While we are on the topic of your gym, right? This was one of the things that I really wanted us to talk about. Uh, like if I see the website for Movement Inc., I think your gym and the whole program is a little bit different to how people view gyms in India and maybe elsewhere as well. But I would
Right.
say that gyms in India can be like very intimidating environments. Like right from the point where you sign up, right? Like you're there, you're like you should sign up for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Whereas like as an example, like one of the things that I see on your website is you just have that 1 month subscription and that's it.
That's it.
There's no like discounting or like that whole like sales strategy that's around that. And also like I think a lot of the photographs on your website and the text like emphasizes that this is maybe a different approach to exercising than a traditional gym, and also that it gives that feel that it's a safe space, especially for women. So if you could talk a little bit about that, how you approach your gym and all of that.
So, I mean, our gym, I see coaches in the same sphere as I see doctors or lawyers or engineers. I don't see myself as a gym owner. I see myself as a coach, and when a person pays me, they're paying me for my competence. They're not paying me for my space. It just so happens that I've got a great space to do what I do. Like you go to a surgeon, you're not asking how much for the scalpel, how much for the light above, how much is it for the bed. I mean, I know Indian hospital billing can go a little nuts, but you don't ask the surgeon, hey, do I have to pay you for that scalpel separately? You pay me for an outcome, and you essentially, what do we have? We have people who can strength train for 12 hours in a month. So they're giving me 12 hours at that time, and they're telling me what are the most useful things I can do in these 12 hours. So my job is, what are the most useful adaptations that I have to seek out for you to do in 12 hours a month? So those adaptations, and I've got multiple choices. You could say, fill them up with, say, a bunch of plyometric stuff, like, say, go with more a CrossFit program where you throw them a lot of volume at them. Or you could send them down the powerlifting route, or you could send them down, say, a more, say, muscle ups or a calisthenics route. But I don't want to get bottled down into the ideology of I'm a powerlifting gym, I am a bodybuilding gym, I'm a hypertrophy gym. I don't want to confuse outcomes with the choices of what exercise you choose to do, how many reps you get to do, what is the most useful thing for you to do. So we pick adaptations carefully, and we don't get bottled down into the kind of gym that we are. So as a coach, say Yash walks in, Yash has never lifted a weight before. What does Yash first thing need to do? Yash needs healthy knees. Yash needs a healthy back. Yash needs healthy shoulders. What is the most logical and simple way for Yash to get to those outcomes? That's my job. So I don't see it as Yash is here to sign up for my gym. Yash is here seeking my judgment to decide how should he be spending those 12 hours in the most fruitful way possible, and in the most, say, how do we put it? I call it value for time and value for exercises done. So when you flip that approach, and you flip it from why is the client here, when you flip it into that outcome, it changes. It didn't even strike me as an option to sell a 1-year membership. I literally don't know why I would sign up a client, because if a client signs up and they figure out that, hey, maybe I'm not quite enjoying this process, or maybe I'm going to say, for example, I want a different kind of outcome, I'll tell them, hey, that makes sense. Here's what you need to be doing if you want to be a bodybuilder. My gym might not be the right place for a bodybuilder, because that's not what we generally go about. That's not, in my opinion, it's not a useful adaptation for 99% of humanity. Becoming a bodybuilder is not the most useful thing to do. But if a person wants to be a bodybuilder, I'm not going to tell them your goals are wrong or your approach is wrong. I'm just going to tell them, here is the most optimal way for you to get there. It may not be in this space. It may be somewhere else, but go find that. So when we went with that inverted approach of asking people what they want and giving them the simplest way to get there, and finding that aligns and they enjoy doing this in our space, it works well.
Right.
Does that make sense? So that it's just, we don't even think of it as gym memberships. I never saw myself as selling a gym membership.
Yeah.
I never saw myself as a gym owner. And that just primarily comes from just enjoying teaching people, enjoying coaching people movement, rather than thinking of it as I am selling a gym membership. You come here and run on the treadmill for an hour. We've never seen ourselves. We don't have treadmills in our gym, for example.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I think along with this, there's one thing that I wanted to ask the both of you, right? I think the role that both of you play these days, it's and the whole situation is kind of ironic. Like with the internet, we have, you know, access to much more information about fitness than we ever did, and that feels so overwhelming. And it feels like right from like when should I get up, what should I put in my body, like what kind of exercise should I do. It feels it feels like there's so much of conflicting information out there that you need someone who can guide you through this, like who can guide you through all of that. So like what would you say to someone looking to get fitter? Like how can they cut through a lot of the BS? How can they get to the right information? And what are like the first couple of changes that they can make in their life which would have a vast impact on on their health?
Right. Okay. Loaded questions.
It's a big. Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was going to say it's a big question, and it is a complex one. And I think if you do look at the internet today, there is so much out there. It's totally overwhelming, and I think because there is so much information, it's what do you start with? It's like, well, what's best for me? So it's not actually easy to answer your question, Yash. I think the best thing to do is to meet with the client, work with them initially to understand what it is they're trying to achieve, right? So you really need to understand why they're motivated to change and what kind of outcome they're looking for. And then based on that, you can start to build a structured plan for them. And that structured plan may be around certain types of exercises because they want to be fitter in certain types of ways. And then from that, you can progress it. So the important thing with any kind of structured plan is that it has progression, because without progression, you're never going to improve. So you'll end up. Yeah, and I see this as well. I see this in the sport that I do, and I see it in the gym as well, where people will go there and do the same stuff they always do. They'll go there and they'll do their routine, which is fine. That's okay, but you're never going to get any better. So if you're not challenging your body won't change. And when you do challenge your body will go through adaptations, right? But as your body goes through those adaptations, your body's like, yeah, I caught you out now. So, it's like, yeah, I understand how that works and I can do that okay. But then if you accept that and you don't continue to challenge your body, then you'll plateau. So there's that constant kind of pushing of your body in different ways to put it under stress in a safe way, to make sure that you're constantly adapting and developing. So I think all of those things are super important. I think the other thing is that people just generally need to get active, right? So there are, and I'm generalizing here, but let's just say the vast majority of people don't do maybe more than 3 or 4 hours of exercise per week. So that's a big problem. So, people who are in that kind of category, if you like, my advice to them would be just start walking. Yeah. You've probably gained weight, you've gained fat, you're probably heavier than you've ever been. If you want to start changing that, just take yourself for a walk every day. go and do 10,000 steps and record that you're doing that. Yeah. And be super consistent with it. So and I guess for me, the most important thing is the consistency element. So if you can execute your plan in a consistent way, then in some respects, it doesn't matter what your plan is. You're always going to improve to an extent because you're getting out there, you're getting it done day in, day out. So for those type of people, I would say, start with walking, build it into your daily life, and then from there, if you enjoy what you're doing, then you can build it up. Because I think I wanted to come back to something that Adarsh was talking about earlier, actually, in that the type of gym that you have, which I thought was super interesting. Because one of the things that I find when I go to the gym is that it just seems like everyone's into one max reps. It's like I've been to lots of gyms, right? And I've been a member of lots of gyms as well. But it seems to me that there's a trend and there's a focus to lift as much weight as you can. So, I find that quite strange in that, and I know we're digressing off the subject a little bit here, Yash, but I think this is quite an important point, but we can maybe come back to it. It's just the appropriateness of what you're doing. So it's not, I talked about consistency, I talked about having a structured plan, but I think having a plan which is appropriate is also super important, because like I said, I see a lot of people going to the gym and doing one max reps, and sometimes they don't have great technique. Actually, often they don't have great technique, and as a client in the gym, you can't kind of intervene and say to someone, oh, you should be lifting this way or you should be doing that, because that creates or can create conflict. So yeah, I think the appropriateness of what someone is doing within their plan is super important, because if you get it wrong, which personally I have done before, you will get hurt. The majority of my injuries have come from two things: either doing DIY at home or from trying to lift weight which is either inappropriate or too heavy for me in the gym. I tore out my bicep head doing bench press because I was lifting too much, and I was with a coach. So yeah, so appropriateness is super important, and I think all of this really goes back to understanding your client, understanding what it is they want to achieve, building a structured plan around that, making sure that it's appropriate for them, and that appropriateness is based on you seeing how they operate in the gym, but also having some information about their history, their experience, etc. So everything should be about the client and really understanding where they're coming from and where they're going to. So sorry, that was a long answer, but that's a very detailed question.
Yes, great bouncing off point too. So thank you. It gave me a good bouncing off point. No, adding to what Mike said, I mean, yeah, there's the most of the time. How do we put this? In India, the problem isn't as much one max. Yeah, ego lifting happens in India too, where you'd see a person trying to pick a weight which they shouldn't be picking. But I think a lot of it comes from a lack of two perspectives. Number one is being in a gym isn't seen as building skill. Now, one of the biggest problems I have with strength training as a general practice, as it's widely practiced, is it's just there's not enough emphasis on the skill of lifting. You're in the gym, we've got to understand the context for lifting weights comes from, it's a mild overcompensation for all the things we don't do in everyday life as we were built to do. Like say your body is built for moving things. Your body is built to bear a load. Your body is built for compressive loading, rotation, all sorts of things. And when you go to a gym, you're trying to compensate for all of those things you're not doing anymore outside the gym by being in the gym. So there is a skill, there is a certain skill aspect of movement which gets neglected an awful lot. And being able to get people to appreciate, hey, there's a skill to a deadlift, there's a skill to a glute ham raise, there is a skill to a push-up, there's a skill to benching, and recognizing that skill, when you lack the capacity to exercise that skill, when you're not strong enough to do something, or when you're pushing too hard on something, how is it affecting your skill acquisition? How is it making you better at the skill? So being able to take those two steps, they're constantly trying to assess where the client is in terms of skill acquisition, how good they're getting, where does this fit into the big picture of, say, a 6-month plan, or even forget a 6-month plan, even a 4-week small cycle of figuring out where am I, how far am I from where I want to be with the skill 4 weeks from now. That can really keep a lot of our how do we put this, our baser instincts for a bigger deadlift or a bigger squat, or aspiring to do a movement we might not be ready from a skill perspective. That can really keep it in check when you think of it as a skill. And number 2, is it the right adaptation even to begin with? Like Mike also alluded to this, but is it right for your client? Even if my client might think something looks cool to do, but they're not ready for it, it's my job to say, hey, listen, the skill is a hard one to acquire given where your skill level currently lies. So let me give you some context for how you get there, and giving them a clear path to get to that outcome, and giving them a realistic sense of this is what it's going to take to get here. Can you hang there with me patiently and work on the skill rather than try and rush and do something you might not be ready for? But the skill part of it, picking the most useful adaptation and framing the right volume. When I say volume, I could mean reps, set, rest, all of those parameters, but just encompassing all these 3 things in a framework which is coherent and fun for my client and sustainable for my client, and leaves them wanting to do more with it, and gives them some framework for, hey, this is how I am better from last week. When they can recognize that themselves. Say, for example, we had a client who went from a 24-inch box push-ups. We use box push-up progressions because I don't like knee push-ups. I think knee push-ups are an abomination, for example. We go the box push-up progression. A client moved from a 24-inch box to an 18-inch box. And today she went and knocked out about 3 reps on a 12-inch box, and she tried out a 3rd set. And she immediately recognized that, hey, I'm getting better at this. You see how I got a little more depth and I was a little closer to the ground. That is a win for us, because that lays down, she understands intuitively now that there is a progression, there is a way to get better, and it's going to take time. But it is an outcome which she will arrive at. Rather than trying to belt out push-ups on the floor, trying to get too much volume on the floor, not getting full push-ups in, too much internal rotation, or just not looking great on the push-up and hurting themselves, or worse yet, just not going anywhere with it. So I think framing goals, just being that kind of an environment, like it again goes back to the kind of environment we try and frame for our clients, just being the kind of environment where clients feel like this is a place where they're going to give me context for what I'm doing, and I have fun doing that thing. At the same time, I know I'm going somewhere with it. It's a bit of a tricky balance. There's a lot of intangibles going on there, but at the end of the day, if you keep coming back for it and you're getting better, people recognize it, I feel.
Yeah, but I think also that's one of the benefits of working with the coach, because as a coach, your job is to be, almost pedantic about the skill aspect and making sure that your client is executing good technique every time. And as a client, when you're training, it's sometimes hard to kind of visualize yourself in terms of the movements that you're doing. But when you're working with a coach, the coach can see everything. Yeah. And the coach's role is to correct you and to make sure that you make the changes, and also to help you understand why. So, it's fine saying, oh, you're doing this not quite in the right way, you should do it like this, but then explaining why. And so I think having the rationale for it also kind of creates a bit of psychology in the client's head, because they understand, well, okay, yeah, I should do this because it's going to help me in that, and it's going to help me train these type of muscles rather than perhaps something else. Because a lot of the times I see people in the gym doing training, and I sometimes ask myself the question, what muscles do you think you're training right now? Because some of the exercises that they do, I'm like, I don't think you're going to get the value that you expect out of that because of the way that you're doing it. And it might be things as simple as, not using full range of motion. So I see a lot of people doing, different exercises where they will only maybe use a third or even less the range of movement for a particular exercise or muscle group. And I'm like, you're wasting your time, and you're actually going to develop the muscle in probably the wrong way. So I think that the role of the coach is really, really important. And I think anyone who goes to a gym and is serious about changing their physique, or wanting to cut fat, or to, be good at lifting weight, they need to work with a coach, at least initially, to really understand
the context.
The context of all of this, because as coaches, we're trained in physiology, anatomy, movement. We understand all of this, so we can communicate that back to the client. And this goes back to your original question, Yash, around being overwhelmed with the internet. I think a lot of people today watch Instagram and watch TikTok and see guys doing different things, calisthenics or whatever it might be, and they think they can replicate it. And to an extent, they probably can, but the risk that they have is, without proper coaching, they are likely to get injured. And coming back from injury can be frustrating and a long road. So
I think Mike's pretty much, Mike nailed it. Context, just the coach's job. And I mean, just all the information we really need has been out there for a while. I mean, it's like, I remember there's a guy named Lyle McDonald. He's one of our industry's better voices, more sane voices. And I think I read a 1994 email by him. He had answered someone in 1994. He'd written this long email for the basic truths of training, as in, like, he'd written about what works, what doesn't work. It was a very short email, but pretty much how well it holds up even now is just not funny. So a lot of the principles which just hold up are just still there, like linear progression or adaptation curve and stuff like this, or the general adaptation curve principle. All of these exist for a while. We've known these things. So a lot of what's out there is noise, and a lot of what's, there's a clickbaity aspect to what's being said. There'll be one study, taking a study, putting it out of context. Just say, for example, someone found that when you do this once a week, you're going to be fine. Or like, you just need 10 minutes of exercise a day. So much of the stuff is just, I don't know where they come from, or I don't know why one study can literally, why do people feel like one study can undo these decades of knowing stuff which we know works and exists? I despise that aspect of the content farm or the content click, but whatever, you know what I mean? Just eyeball.
So I totally agree.
Chasing the eyeball, just like one study can invalidate decades of understanding or decades of practice of what we know actually works and helps. And that bothers me immensely. But Yash, go for it, Yash. Next question.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Adarsh, because as Mike was speaking, I realized that there's this commonality between the two of you. And I think let's talk about that for like 5 minutes, because I think that's a really important point. I see with both of your content is that you put it out on social media, right? But you do it in your own way. Like, you are not catering to that virality, by just being as controversial as possible, or as clickbaity as possible. Like, Adarsh, you and I had also had that discussion, right? Where I know that everything you put out there is like well researched. And me as a marketing person, when I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, this is not optimized for the marketing part of it, but at the same time, I recognize that it's almost like a part of your ethics, right? Like, this is how you want to package your information, and that's really important to you. So if both of you could just talk a little bit about how you approach putting your information, your thoughts out there.
Mike would like to go first, or?
Man, really?
Okay, I'll go. I do. So
I can.
The way I think about my content is, one of the least favorite aspects of the fitness industry for me is the lack of retention. It's how, when a client signs up with you, sure, I'm not arguing that I need to be greedy and just hold on to them for life. If my client is independent enough to make decisions and they can progress safely, I would love for them to be independent. But my industry has a retention problem, where I remember seeing a IPO for Tawarkar, one of those gyms, about 15 years ago, where essentially in my industry, for every 100 people who sign up, only 30 make it through and re-sign at the end of the year. So a whole bunch of, if you have to grow from there, you're essentially going to have to add all those 70, 60, 70 people you've lost, and then you've got to add another 20 more. So you literally have to keep growing. You have to double every year to kind of stay in place to cater to growth. So there is a problem where we don't hold on to enough people who walk in the door and do a good enough job with them that they feel the need, or they feel the need to keep paying you to do your job. And what that basically means is it sets you up to basically scream over another person and try and compete to get more people in the door. And that forces you to say the most outrageous thing to get them in the door. It's like essentially like Jackass. There's a TV show, Jackass. It is like that at some absurd level where you have to keep doing more and more outrageous things, or say more and more outrageous things, just to grab enough attention to have people come in. And then you'll be like, hey, I was just kidding. All that outrageous stuff, I didn't mean it. You just have to have a calorie deficit and you have to lift weights 4 times a week. And to get a person to say that to a person, it feels like they're having to say these weird things. I have this one trick for push-ups. You can get a push-up in 5 minutes. Even if you've done it for years, you've not gotten it. So that kind of outrageous marketing, it literally is just a way to get a person in the door. And I have a problem with that, because if the problem was that the client has unrealistic expectations, you're just playing to it in the form of marketing to get them in the door. And let's face it, as a coach, my bandwidth is limited. we have a bunch of clients. I want to hold on to them, and we can accommodate 1 or 2 new people every week or every second week and do a good job with them and make sure that they add on top of our existing client base and they keep this practice going. Because hidden truth behind strength and conditioning is, while you could have a 3-month goal or a 6-month goal, once you start doing this, you can't stop doing it. It's not like, hey, at the age of 45, Yash, sit back, relax. You don't have to deadlift anymore. You don't have to squat anymore. You don't have to do any more push-ups. You don't have to do any more pull-ups. You don't have to work towards a pull-up. Never stops. It's one of those things that you just have to keep plugging away at. And that's a skill perspective of it. But the moment I'm going to tell a person, hey, I'm going to teach you to do pull-ups, it may take 9 to 12 months to get there, and you're going to have to do it all your life. That's the worst pitch in the history of mankind. Like, that is the worst pitch ever. It sounds like I'm hiring people to build a pyramid. That's essentially it. And no one's going to sign up to build pyramids. Right? No one. I can never pay anyone enough to build a pyramid. I'm like, hey, you just have to spend maybe 30, 40 years of your life. I might cut your arm off at the end of it. That's just a horrible pitch. And that's essentially what my honest pitch is to most of my clients. Hey, yeah, you're not going to stop this. You're going to have to plug away at this. And I try and maybe just try and tone that down a bit. But in the essence of it, if you want to be honest with your clients, just give them that honest perspective. If they like your voice, they will join you and they will plug away at this little relentless fight, which they're going to embark with you on for decades. Which is why our average client, if I look at our 7 a.m. batch, like we have batches, right? We have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 a.m. clients. And when I look at that batch and I see those 14 people there, 8 of them are from pre-2020. And 6 of them are from the last 2 years since the pandemic hit and blah, blah. We've rebuilt the batches and all that. About 6 of them are from the last 3 years. But it's important that a good chunk, that 60% of the batch, 70% of the batch is still people who were around with us in 2017, 18, 19. And they get it. They get that it's just, you just plug away at it. So when a new person walks in the door, automatically it just lets them know that, hey, you're going to have to hang in here for the long haul. When you see that person do something crazy, that craziness isn't a function of them being here for 10, 15 minutes. It's not a function of even them being here for the last 3 months. It's them having been here for a long time and having plugged away at this problem that they're able to solve it well. So that's I don't know. That's the most honest perspective to a person.
Adarsh, I love what you said. I think you summarized it in a really nice way. And I love the analogy with the pyramid. But it's true. It's also true because if you don't do resistance training, you're at greater risk of gaining weight, getting things like osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. And we know as the body gets older, muscle mass shrinks, bones become less solid than what they were. So the outlook for life is generally kind of like a bit of a negative one, really, when you think of, when you look at the anatomy and the physiology of the body. But the best thing that we have is kind of the solution for that, right? because if we can persuade people to come to the gym and train, then they are less likely to develop those types of issues, and they can still be strong and lifting good weight well into their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. You sometimes see those guys as well who they're still lifting big weights or doing a huge amount of pull-ups, and these guys may have been doing it for 30, 40 years, and they're now they're at pension age. I think that's like super important to try and communicate that message to people in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're it's a life sentence, even though it is. So I think that's super important. But going back to kind of like the social media point, I think from my perspective, I feel like I have a social responsibility around what I write and what gets uploaded to the internet, even if nobody reads it. If I've published it, then I published it because, one, I believe it, two, I'm trained in it, and three, I want to help. So I think that's kind of an important point as well. And this goes back to trying to cut through the BS of what you see on the internet. I want to be able to give people content that is actually going to make a difference. I don't do any clickbait stuff. I don't try and use kind of like shock tactics or anything like that to try and persuade clients to come in, because typically you don't want those kind of clients anyway, because you might gain them, but you'll probably lose them quite quickly because they don't have the same philosophy as what you might have. And I think that's important as well. As a trainer, as a coach, you need to be able to get on well with your clients. And one of the things I say to my clients is that if I don't like you, then I don't want to work with you. That's kind of that sounds really harsh, but it's a guiding principle in that we don't always vibe with the person that we're working with, and if I think from a relationship perspective it doesn't feel quite right, then I would rather not onboard that relationship or exit that relationship at an early point in time, because I just feel that the client won't get the most out of it. So for me, everything is really about integrity and being honest with what you're producing, and and being able to stand back and say I truly believe in that, because I've either been taught it, I've studied it, or I've done it myself, and I have the experience, and I have the t-shirt to show that it works.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And there's a clarity which comes with honest content that I really enjoy that part of it. Like, say, for example, the reason I find writing so excruciating is it forces you to really condense your thinking as well. It really forces you to test your own clarity.
Yeah.
So if I'm so convinced my product is so good, and you will always believe your product or your communication or your coaching or the way you say it might be the best, but at some level, to really stress test that idea, putting it out there is a very useful way to stress test the robustness of my own ideas. Like, say, the number of ideas out there are limited. Like, say, if you really look at it, you have an idea of a calorie deficit, you have an idea of an exclusion diet, you have an idea of fasting for a different amounts of time. But how robustly can I communicate it, and what are my reasons for believing that idea works? There's a stress test of an idea which I really enjoy doing with communicating it, which is why I also communicate so little, because the moment I stress test something I think I know in my head for certainty, the moment I try stress testing, I'm like, why am I not conveying this as clearly as it feels in my head? And that's a tricky one for me. But I know in 10 years, in 5-10 years, I will get better at expressing more of my ideas. But sometimes you're just not able to express the idea as clearly as you can practice it in your head. And which is why mine is almost borderline just like not marketing really. It's just me trying to say, hey, I'm doing this. Hey, look at me. I do this here down the road here. Do you want to come and give it a shot? It's more like like those signboards back in the day, these guys would curl signboards in the corner of a road and point at their business. That's essentially how I've seen my effort to create content. It's just more like letting the world know, hey, we do this. We've been trying to do this for 10 years and we're going to be doing it for another 10, hopefully. So, yeah.